For more on the tariffs and the film industry, let's bring in media executive and screenwriter Nihaar Sinha. Welcome to the show. Great having you. And how have recent U.S. tariffs on China affected the cost of film and TV production?
So film and TV production is a very global enterprise, and right now there's a lot of production that's taking place just over the border in Canada in hubs like Vancouver and Toronto. And so, not knowing exactly what the labor actions are going to be and the trade actions, there's a lot of uncertainty because, as was mentioned, there are tax incentives that are supported by the government of Canada and other countries that make those locations very competitive from a cost standpoint to go film there. And that government could decide that as part of this broader trade action to remove those incentives, which would make it comparatively much more expensive, not just in Canada, but overall. And so there's risk in that, but at the same time, there's a potential currency depreciation aspect where if the Canadian dollar, which has already fallen to about 70 cents on the US dollar, either continues to fall or remains there, then of course it's going to be relatively cheaper. So it's unclear how it's all going to net out, but certainly executives are nervous at a time when the industry has just dealt with labor actions with 2 strikes and COVID and all sorts of volatility in the market. So it's a very precarious position, and there's just a lot of uncertainty and not knowing exactly what the direct effects are going to be, but even the secondary and tertiary effects.
I see. And like Mexico and Canada are economies where, for example, specific parts of productions are done. How does that integration work?
So there are subsidiary companies of big studios that are headquartered or domiciled in those nations. There's also at this point a very rich talent pool of crew members and physical production individuals and VFX and post-production facilities that are based in those regions. And so any sort of disruption to the current ecosystem of production infrastructure that exists and the volume of productions that are made in Canada would be heavily disruptive. And given the state of the Canadian economy, I think they probably don't want this really important source of economic stimulus to go away. I know that there's a lot of nationalist pride and sentiment that is building in Canada as a result of recent rhetoric. And so another component could be certain barriers in terms of quotas that are put in place for Canadian productions or productions that are filmed in Canada in terms of the on-screen talent, in terms of what % of the labor has to be, living in Canada, and also, in regions like Quebec where there's, I think, some French language and just some other covenants to qualify for certain incentive programs. And so I think we may see some adjustment on the margins there, but ultimately I don't think the Canadians want to lose the spending and lose the economic stimulus, because especially at this point, it's going to be putting a lot of Canadians out of work, and I don't think they want that either.
I'd like to go beyond North America. How might these tariffs affect the global TV and film industries?
I think that there are other places like Ireland and Spain and Romania that are continually trying to attract productions. Ireland is a big filming location right now, same with Spain. And so they may see that there's an opportunity, if Canada is becoming relatively more expensive, to try and attract productions over there. But at the same time, there may be further trade action. And so they have to balance that with their status quo of also sort of protecting their local film market and film ecosystem. In those markets, there's also the public service broadcasting companies, especially in the UK. And so there's a lot to balance. And then, of course, with China and the trade action, the Chinese authorities may impose quotas on the number of American films that release in China. And so there's going to be a lot of competition, and there's going to be a lot of trying to negotiate how the broader sort of retaliatory trade actions square with the fact that Hollywood is very intertwined globally, and it's very interdependent. And I don't think anyone wants to lose the economic stimulus, but at the same time, media executives and film officials in these countries are just one piece of the overall picture as countries decide how to handle this era of trade action.
And Nihaar, do you see studios and streaming platforms already responding to these potentially higher costs?
I think the studios have been in a cost-cutting posture for some time. I think it's just been one blow after the other. If you think about it, from the COVID disruptions to the movements on Wall Street with the stock prices of media companies and the focus on profitability, you saw a lot of consolidation, and then that led right into the dual labor action. And the industry is still recovering in the long tail of really the past 5 years. And so I think there's a sense of, how much uncertainty and how many blows can the industry take. I think cost cutting and efficiency is on everyone's minds. It has been. I don't think that's going to change, but they can only focus on what's within their locus of control. And so I think whether it's the price of raw materials and how that filters into production budgets to where they're ordering shows and how that is based in America versus the local productions that are commissioned in other territories, and also the types of programming that's being ordered from a budget standpoint is all going to be affected, as it has been, based on not just this trade movement and trade action, but just the overall economic conditions of the past 5 years.